Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump has been successful. Actually, it's been a tremendous political victory for President Trump to achieve voting reforms. Now, you can read the Washington Post. Here's an article that will be below. Expand access, a historic restriction, what the Georgia voting law really does. This is by Peter W. Stevenson. Okay. If you look how the new law limits voting, limiting voting, you're not limiting voting, you're placing guidelines that instead of 6 months, 7 months prior to voting, you get, all the time in the world to apply for an absentee. Now it's just 3 months or so. Big deal. What is the problem there? Why is that a calamity? It does not, if you read this article or read the actual law itself, it does not end early voting. It doesn't end the Sundays prior to, there are 2 weekends, including Sundays, that you can vote. All it does is make a person, if they want a mail-in, to show their ID and prove that they live in a location. Oh my God, God forbid, you have to actually prove that you live someplace. How is that what Joe Biden called Jim Eagle? So this is the Washington Post. And even they're saying there's a section, a few ways it expands voting. Okay? So there are a few ways it expands voting, but President Trump won a tremendous political victory because this doesn't focus on any specific group. It's not going to be challenged successfully in a court of law because there's nothing unconstitutional about it. It's very similar in many respects to voting requirements in blue states. The only difference is that if you want to obtain a mail-in prior to, instead of in-person voting, you can do so. You just don't have, you have close to 3 months. You mean you can't, so you need 6 months? The going from 6 months to 3 months is a crime against humanity. And everyone, if you're a wonderful, morally superior, liberal Democrat, why don't you explain who you think doesn't have ID? Everyone in this country has ID. You can get ID. It's not difficult to get. Okay? It is a very, prejudice, a very biased, let's just leave it at that, viewpoint to say, well, this group of individuals don't have ID. Well, of course they do. But that's how liberal Democrats think of other groups of people. It's not the end of the world to simply prove that you live in a certain address or, show your ID. It's not the end of the world. I had to show my ID in California to vote in the presidential election. So it's not the end of the world. But see, Democrats and media, you're now getting a more sober analysis of it. Hit subscribe to this channel right now to my new Patreons. If you want to support my voice long-term, ladies and gentlemen, my Patreon link is below. It's on hagoodman.com. You could read my writing in The Hill, The Huffington Post, Salon, The Jerusalem Post, The Federalist, The Daily Caller, The Times of Israel, other publications, The Roanoke Times, on hagoodman.com. And my Patreon link is there if you want to support my voice long-term. You can see my debates there as well. All President Trump or Republicans wanted was an update to protocol that was implemented at a moment's notice because of science. These were pandemic-related protocols where you could just, there were virtually no restrictions to voting before Election Day. Now there's not, I wouldn't even call this, I don't even call it a restriction. If you want to vote and get a mail-in, you can do so. There are drop boxes. You can do so. Okay? There are just updated reforms to make sure And so to make sure that people who live in addresses, that people who, let's say, left the state don't get don't have the residence they left get mail-ins. Now, again, people might say, well, there was no evidence of anything. Fine, I'll give you that. There was no evidence of anything. There was no evidence of anything that was horrible. But that doesn't mean you don't want to ensure that Republicans or Democrats don't take advantage of any loopholes or of any potential issues in the future. So it's a tremendous victory for President Trump. You have to understand also, like, the duplicity and the hypocrisy, the irony of all of this. It was just a couple of months back that Democrats were defending Kemp and Raffensperger. Now they don't like him. Before they loved him. Now they don't like him. Actually, before that, they didn't like him. Stacey Abrams said that she had won. There wasn't a transfer of power, or she didn't accept the outcome of that election. Okay? She stated that she had won, that Kemp did not win. Okay? And so then they didn't like Brian Kemp and the Georgia Republicans, but then when Trump went after them, then they liked the Georgia Republicans and Kemp and Raffensperger. And now they don't like them. They don't like them. So Democrats, there's no rhyme or reason. It's just simply whatever suits them politically at that moment. Stacey Abrams doesn't accept the fact that Brian Kemp won, says she's still that he's not a legitimate governor. Same thing with President Trump. He's an illegitimate president. When they don't win, it's okay to tarnish and ruin democracy and to rip up the Constitution. When they win, oh my God, how dare you? And so it's just unbelievable. They were defending Republicans. They're investigating a call that Trump had with Georgia Republicans. So it's like democracy, the Constitution, national security revolves around the political ambitions and whether or not of Democrats and whether or not they win or lose. That's it. Facebook ads became... You realize now foreign policy has been relegated to Facebook ads and Twitter bots. And whether Trump had the audacity to ask the president of Ukraine to investigate Biden for exactly what the United States government is investigating his son for. The whole thing with Biden's son, they're investigating for a whole bunch of things, not just his taxes. That's according to Politico. Okay, so we didn't know they impeached President Trump while there was an ongoing investigation because the investigation started in 2018 for Hunter. But they still impeached him. Could you imagine if we had known? The whole point, the entire narrative that they tried to perpetuate was, oh my God, the Bidens are pure as the driven snow. They're salt of the earth people. They're really good. Meanwhile, Hunter's girlfriend threw his .38 in the dumpster behind a convenience store located a couple blocks away from a high school. Okay? And that's not even counting the laptop that he just left, possibly in a drunken stupor, at a computer repair store. I mean, you couldn't get away with any of this. Then they're like, oh my God, they're touching themselves in ecstasy with any story that's negative against Republicans, but they sure, you better believe they didn't talk about Uma Abedin's husband, former Democratic congressman who served prison time. They didn't really talk about Anthony Weiner that much. They didn't really talk about what Bob Menendez was alleged to have done. New Jersey senator. They haven't really spoken about allegations against Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. And then who's taught? Well, I mean, we have a misconduct against Andrew Cuomo. Like now it's 8 people, maybe more. So you don't have a leg to stand on if you're a wonderful, morally superior liberal Democrat. Look at your own political party. And look at what the New Jersey senator was accused of having done. And where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Anyway, we can go on forever. But the issue here is the following, okay? Because you have MSNBC, CNN, the Washington Post, and actually the Washington Post, believe it or not, has actually been pretty fair. I mean, from the stuff that, if you can imagine, pretty fair from what I've read pertaining to the Georgia law. Or at least the article that I'm putting below. But when it's Trump, Russia, or any accusation against, or any narrative, you have pretty much the New York Times, the Washington Post, generally, MSNBC, CNN, Daily Beast, Vanity Fair, Esquire, Rolling Stone, Vice, The Atlantic, Mother Jones, The Nation, The New Yorker, New York Magazine, Time Magazine. We can go on forever. Every major newspaper in the country, almost every major newspaper in the country. You only have the New York Post going at bat for President Trump. You don't really have any other major publication. Even Fox News doesn't really go to bat always for President Trump. And so you create this zeitgeist, this hysteria, this belief that, oh my God, Georgia, what they did was absolutely horrendous. Then you get Major League Baseball and, other, major corporations involved. And they say, well, this is wrong. We're taking a moral stance. It's like, no, you're not. You're picking a political side because you think it benefits you in terms of revenue or in terms of political, influence. Or you think perhaps you'll get away with things politically, which will totally backfire with Major League Baseball, because they're now the antitrust exemption is going to be hopefully removed. That's not cancel culture. Okay, that is not. Okay, that whole thing started on the left. If you dare to have a viewpoint that is different or conservative, like, for example, this banjo player said something good about a conservative journalist, and suddenly there was outrage throughout Twitter, and he was forced to leave the band. Why? What world do we live in? You can't even have an opinion. You can't even have a different viewpoint. Every political viewpoint now is tied to morality. Well, here's a little lesson on morality. If you've tied the notions of, if you correlate the notions of good versus evil to just voting Democrat, you are oftentimes on the wrong side of history. And you're probably engaged or, oblivious to the most immoral things your political side has done and continues to do. Just ask the people of Libya in the failed intervention from President Obama and Biden and Clinton, turning the country into a failed state. Or numerous countries from Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld, who Bush is now the favorite of Democrats, a good Republican. When George W. Bush is the favorite Republican of Democrats, you know what moral side they're on. But it's like they don't really read the actual laws or legislation. These are reforms that take into account very, impulsive protocol that was based on an impulsive reaction to science and pandemic-related, protocol. And they judge everything as this cataclysmic, battle between, this cataclysmic, this apocalyptic, battle between two opposing forces, and you have to pick one. So now even Major League Baseball gets involved. Well, it's not an example of cancel culture to say, okay, if you're getting into politics, then now you're going to face repercussions. You're the one who wants to punish Georgia. That is what the left started, okay? Getting people in the pocketbook simply for, making them lose a job, making them lose revenue, simply for holding an opinion that in this case will not be viewed in a court of law as unconstitutional, because there's nothing unconstitutional about the reforms. If anything, the Washington Post even stated that it expanded access in certain respects. But if you're going to enter the arena of politics, well, then you're going to see Republicans didn't, oh, well, it was an example with President Trump and other Republicans. It's not an example of sensitivity, being overly sensitive to say, okay, you want to choose the Democratic Party, you want to remove the All-Star game and punish Georgia. Well, now we're going to look at the antitrust exemption. You do business across state lines, you're subject to the Sherman antitrust legislation, and you know what? Now there can be opposing leagues, and you better believe, like, I would love to see an opposing league. I mean, you had the USFL with the NFL that President Trump was a part of for a second, but you have Arena League football. You at least, let's put it this way: college football is not really a direct competitor, although it kind of is. There's no direct competition to baseball. I would love to see the best players from Cuba, Venezuela, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Canada, South Korea, Japan. If you have just 8 countries right there, that would be the best players. Tomorrow they could come close to defeating the World Series champions. Any World Series champion in the past 10 years from Major League Baseball, or defeat them. It would be very competitive. The best team. I mean, you kind of have that, but not in the United States of America. So if there's a league within the United States of America with all the best players from those countries, you could start off with like 5 or 6 teams. My God. And could you imagine the World Series champion of that league? All the best talent in the countries that I just named? Are you kidding me? Anyway, give me your thoughts below. It'll be amazing. Trump won a tremendous political victory, and as always, he wins pretty much like he's all by himself. Every element of society, every aspect of society is against this man. And he still ends up gaining political victories. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now.